So we're up here in Ithaca, New York, and we came up here to do some waterfall shooting. And this is what we were met with here today. This is a gorge trail right in the town of Ithaca. It's called the Cascadilla, I'm not sure, Cascadilla Falls Gorge Trail. And it's actually closed for the winter. So there are other waterfalls here in Ithaca, but this was a big disappointment. So they have this big gate up and we can't get through. This is the first falls. We could take a couple of shots of this, but not exactly what we were hoping for today. So this is actually one of the smaller falls here, and you could easily spend 3 or 4 hours on this gorge trail, and it's paved and there's steps and it's a real easy hike. So I have my camera set up. Eric's back over here, he's shooting, and we're gonna spend some time here today in Ithaca. There's a lot of waterfalls in Ithaca, New York, and then tomorrow we're gonna be out also doing some shooting and see what we see. Tomorrow it's supposed to snow, so it should be interesting. So here's my setup, and gonna try to get a couple of shots here. So I found Eric, and we're actually getting some decent shots from this area. Even though we can't go walk the gorge trail, it's still a nice waterfall, and we're gonna shoot for a few more minutes and then we're gonna leave here.
Yeah, you do the best with what you can. So we're kind of far away, so we're using telephoto lenses. Bill's using the 7200, I'm using the 135 lens, and just trying to, find that nice little spot. The best situation with really landscapes in general, but especially waterfalls, is a little bit of cloud cover. Where you everything is nice and evenly lit. Right now the sun's starting to come out, so you can see way off in the distance there. I will show you some pictures. There's some bright spots of sun hitting the falls. Yeah,
so it's like a dotted cloudy day, and we're waiting, and the images definitely look better when the sun goes behind the clouds. You get a nice even light, and it's a flat light. Whereas here, if you see the left side of the falls there, it's gonna have light on it. And this applies to any kind of landscape photography. You want the light to be kind of as flat as possible.
All right, so we're gonna go head out to another set of falls right now that we haven't been to yet, so kind of sight unseen, but we're gonna see what we can do.
Yeah, no, when we get over there, we'll go through some settings and actually talk about, what settings you want to use, and, the tripods and how we have everything set up. All right, see you over there. So we're at a different waterfall here, and I just have a couple of thoughts. I put the Nikon D750 on the camera, and I'm getting some shots here. As you can see, the top of the waterfall again is a little, hot, I would say. And you got the sun hitting that middle piece right there, but the sun's going down, so hopefully we get a little bit of more of a flat light in a little while. I threw the M50 on the tripod just to see how it is to work with that doing landscapes. I haven't really done that much. I did a little bit of night photography with it, but for this type of photography, you don't have to go crazy buying gear. The images that I'm getting out of the M50 look just as nice as the ones I'm getting out of my D750. And if you're working off of a tripod and shooting at ISO 100 and you're into landscape photography, as long as your lenses are decent, and I'm only using the kit lens, but if you have some wide lenses and you get the focal length that you need for the types of shots you want, you can make some really great images with an inexpensive camera. So I'm curious to see how these two edit against each other. I framed the exact same shots here. So when I get back to the computer, I'll actually, edit them, and I'll see, if there's really that much of a difference shooting at ISO 100 and shooting off a tripod.
We went looking for some more waterfalls. We found some, and had to do a little searching to find how to get to them. And it's snowing, and we found out where to go, but it's a little dicey. They rerouted the trail, which actually cuts across the river above the falls, and there's no reasonable way to get to the bottom of the falls, especially with the ground covered in snow. You can't see where you're walking.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of hit and miss when you're out shooting like this and trying to get really cool landscape shots, and sometimes you got to try to get into spots that maybe aren't the safest, but we're going to see if we can get some shots here. Now, yesterday we said we were going to talk about settings for shooting in these types of conditions, and tripod is a must.
Absolute must.
ND filters are a must.
Yeah, you have to have the ND filter because you want to slow down the shutter to something like 1 second or longer.
Right.
And an ND filter blocks out enough light. A 6 stopper usually is okay, maybe even a 10 stopper if it's bright out, to block out enough light to let you shoot a 3, 5, 10 second exposure if you need to.
Yeah, and you want the water to look soft. So those are the basics, and you want to shoot in manual mode. So basically you set your your aperture for whatever you think you want to do. If you want to try to use a wide open aperture and you maybe create some shallow depth of field, you're going to need a darker ND filter in order to do that, because you're letting more light into the lens. But even if you went middle ground and started at f8, you just adjust your shutter speed until you're right at around between 1 and 10 seconds.
Yeah, really depending on how high the falls are. Kind of rule of thumb that I go by is look at the falls and how long would it take one drop of water to get from the top to the bottom, or from the top to the next break. Because if it's anything shorter than that, you're going to actually get streams that stop halfway.
Yeah, like
and
droplets.
It's going to kind of look choppy. Let them go all the way from the top down to the bottom. So if it's a short falls, you only need sometimes a quarter of a second. If it's a really big waterfall, we saw the 100-foot waterfall in Ithaca yesterday, you need 5 seconds or longer.
Yeah, so it really depends, but if you stay above like 5 seconds or longer, you should be fine with any waterfall, pretty much. And and that's pretty much it. And we use live view on the back of our cameras because it actually shows you your exposure on the back of the camera. When you're looking through an optical viewfinder on my camera, I have no idea, so I'm guessing at the time. So if you use live view, it actually makes it a lot easier to try to figure out your shot with the ND filters on it.
Right, because when you're shooting like this, when you're shooting long exposures, especially when it's cold out and you want to move as quickly as you can, you're only going to get in one session you're going to get 5 or 6 shots, and that's about it, because each shot is a long exposure, and you don't have enough time to play around and tweak your settings each time. So you want to try to get your exposure right the first time, and then maybe recompose, take some different shots.
And it's cold and the weather's not great, so you don't want to be taking your filter off to get focus and things like that. So there's when you use the live view function, the autofocus actually works on both of our cameras.
Right.
So that's the way we do. You can focus first and then put your filter on. If you're using a really dark filter, you can do that, and then just don't touch your focus, and you should be fine until you move the camera or something like that.
Right. So tripod, a shutter release is helpful, not necessary, because you can put your camera on a timer, like a 2-second delay.
That's what I do. I use the exposure delay mode in my camera, which flips the mirror and then it waits 3 seconds to actually take the shot. So I use that a lot, even when I'm using a cable release.
Right. Yeah. So you avoid the camera shake. So
yeah.
Tripod, that ND filter is a must, and something like this, if it's raining a little bit or if it's snowing like this, a lens hood actually comes in handy, because you can avoid getting snowflakes or water droplets on the front of your lens.
Okay, so we're gonna see what we see here. So we're trying to shoot in this spot, and the waterfalls aren't great. There's a lot of sticks and things in the way, but pretty awesome spot to be. So that's one of the things about photography that we both love, is there's a lot of solitude, and even though we're doing it together, we get to spend a lot of time with ourselves just taking the pictures, and it's great. So I'm gonna just show you guys the waterfall we were trying to shoot, and it's a little bit of a mess, but still a cool spot. So that's part of the fun, is exploring. You never know what you're gonna find. So here's one little fall that we stumbled upon here. Definitely a cool spot. It's fun finding these places. So we took a couple of shots. I actually came over here and took some tight shots of this waterfall. And same thing, manual mode, used the settings we talked about, and you get some interesting images. They're not all going to be these great, grand waterfalls, but it's fun finding them. And Eric was doing some telephoto shots from across the way, trying to pick out some stuff in between the tree branches.
Shooting between branches, between trees, between snowflakes, and fighting the cold.
Yeah.
Always a challenge. Basically, I'm shooting wide open, so I'm using the 135 2.0 wide open. I had to put a 10 stop neutral density filter on to get my shutter speed around 5 seconds to 10 seconds or so. But that's in order to try to blur, all the branches that are blocking the waterfalls, to try to blur them as much as possible and focus on just the falls. So we'll see how it comes out.
All right, we're completely freezing right now. So I've only been out here about 15 minutes, and it's still, whoo, it's winter.
This right here is the other side of the trail.
Yeah, that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
This is a summertime activity. It really is. We had to cut everything short yesterday. It snowed. It's still snowing here. What's the temperature outside
It's
right
like
now?
13, 14 degrees.
Yeah, so while this was not the photography trip that we wanted, we had a nice weekend away, and we
Yeah.
got to, hang out and do some shooting and kind of chilling out, which was fun.
Yeah, it's always nice, to go out shooting, for whatever it is. Focus on something. This time it was waterfalls, and you go out and you try. And we did, get to a couple of nice places, but weather conditions slowed us down a little bit. But it was, good to go out and try things.
Yeah, so we still got a few images, and it's a lot of fun. So, with this type of photography, landscape photography, it's about getting out there, getting into nature. It's quiet a lot of the time. We do this a lot together, but even when we're shooting, we kind of go off and do our own thing, and then come back together. And how'd you do? What kind of shots did you get? So it's just a nice way to kind of get a break from everything and head out there.
Yeah, there was a moment yesterday where Bill and I were both shooting down in a ravine, a waterfall. And Bill had finished up. I had a couple of more shots to take, and it was snowing, and I was ankle deep in the water with my tripod, and it was snowing on me, and there was a waterfall, and I was totally alone. And things like that are just great experiences to do, even if you're not shooting.
Yeah, and it gives you a break from your everyday life.
Right.
Yeah, so if you have any questions about settings or things like that for waterfall or landscape photography, don't hesitate to ask. And, plan a little trip like this for yourself if you can. Find some friends, some photography friends, or even if you just want to go by yourself and take a day or two. It's a lot of fun to get out there and kind of reset, get back into nature and you and your camera and have some fun.
Yeah, the number one tip always for photography is get out there and shoot.
That's it. Okay, we'll see you in the next video.